Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. It was under my coffee mug, not in an envelope, not even on the fridge, just a folded napkin half soaked with condensation from my usual morning glass of orange juice. My name was scribbled on it like a careless afterthought. Corey, that's me, Corey Fletcher, the guy who buys bulk toothpaste, who says, "Yes, dear," like it's a full sentence, and who apparently gets life-altering news from napkins. Now I unfolded it slowly, thinking maybe it was a grocery list or some weird cat meme she wanted me to see. But no, it just said, "Going out. Just dinner. Don't wait up, that's all." No love, Cassie, no emoji, not even a dash, just those 5 words. I blinked at it for a solid minute before I even stood up. Just dinner. Since when does she need to tell me she's going out for just dinner? We weren't the check-in type of couple anymore. But this felt rehearsed, like she needed to get ahead of a question I hadn't even asked yet. I looked at the clock. 5:06 p.m. She must have left while I was taking out the trash. I didn't even hear the door close. You ever feel like the furniture in your house suddenly doesn't know you? That was me walking around the living room like a stranger, touching the back of the couch, staring at a framed wedding photo like it was someone else's memory. It was from Asheville, 2012, Cassie in her white lace dress, me sweating through my rented tux. Both of us smiling like fools. The couch was too quiet, the air too still. I checked her side of the bathroom sink. Her favorite perfume was gone. So was the lipstick she only wore when she wanted to be noticed. I opened our shared calendar on my phone, nothing scheduled. Then against my better judgment, I pulled up our bank account. 2 hours earlier, Amore Ristorante Italiano, $168.44. My stomach dropped. She hated Italian. Said it made her bloated and sleepy. Said it was low-effort cuisine. But there she was, ordering $168 worth of just dinner from the exact restaurant where her ex-boyfriend took her on their 3rd date. I only know that because she'd told me years ago when we were still in the oversharing phase. That napkin note suddenly looked like a resignation letter. So I started packing. Not because I had proof, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because I'd spent too many nights staring at ceilings, wondering if I was just a pit stop until something shinier came along. I started folding her things like I was wrapping breakable glass. I packed her toothbrush, her travel bag, even the book she never finished. I lined up the bags by the front door like soldiers waiting for orders. Then I waited. At 9:37 p.m., headlights washed over the living room wall. At 9:39, the door opened, and at 9:40, Cassie froze. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, wine-red heels in her hand, eyes darting between the bags and the napkin she'd forgotten, the one she left behind. I picked it up, held it out gently, and said, "Dinner's over, so's the marriage." When Cassie walked in and saw her bags lined up like a silent jury, she didn't even drop her keys. She just stared at them like she was trying to remember if they were hers. I held up the napkin. Her eyes flicked to it, then to me, and that's when I saw it. Not guilt, not fear, but irritation, like I just spilled coffee on the rug, and she didn't have time to clean it up. "Sigh," she said in that flat, patronizing tone she used when I misplaced the remote. "You're overreacting." Overreacting. I held up my phone without unlocking it and said, "You really spent $168 on rigatoni and wine with Jenna." Her mouth opened, then closed again. It was subtle, but it was enough. I used to adore the way she blinked when she was nervous. Now I felt sick to my stomach watching her do it. "I told you," she said carefully, "it was just dinner." I laughed. I actually laughed. It came out high-pitched and pathetic, like I was losing air. "Cassie, you hate Italian food. You said, and I quote, 'If I wanted to feel like a soggy balloon, I'd eat lasagna in bed.'" Her face went pale. She probably didn't remember saying that, but I did. I remembered everything. That's the curse of being the one who cares more. You store every tiny detail in your head like a fragile archive. And when it all falls apart, it's your mind that gets buried in the wreckage. She didn't respond. Instead, she walked over to the bags and slowly unzipped one, like she was checking to make sure I didn't pack it wrong. I watched her pull out her charger, her lip balm, and a hoodie I'd folded just so. Her hands trembled, but her mouth stayed calm. "You didn't have to do all this," she muttered. That's when I snapped. "Did he drive you home?" I asked quietly. "The guy who loves overpriced wine and your lipstick." She looked up sharply. "What are you even talking about?" I stepped forward and opened the trash can. On top was the cork from a bottle of Emirron, the same wine that had been charged to our joint card. She knew I hated that wine, said it tasted like burnt raisins. She once said it was for people who pretend to like pain, and now it was in our trash. "Tell me who he is," I said. "Tell me if it was worth it." Wrecking this, lying to me, using Jenna as an alibi when she moved to Oregon 6 months ago. Cassie's silence wasn't cruel, it was careful. That's what made it worse. "I didn't cheat," she finally said. "I just needed something that wasn't this." I stood there frozen. "This?" I repeated, gesturing at our home. "This is me. You're talking about me." She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just picked up her bags one by one, like someone retrieving their coat from a restaurant they never wanted to be in. And then, without a word, she walked out. I didn't follow. I just sat down in the chair by the door, the one she used to curl up in, with a book she never finished, and stared at the space she left behind. I thought I was angry. I thought I'd scream or punch a wall, but all I felt was small, like I had been edited out of my own life without even getting a chance to proofread the final version. And deep down, I knew that wasn't the end. Because the truth, I still didn't know who he was. But I was about to find out. The next morning, I woke up on the floor. Not because I passed out from grief or anything poetic like that. No, just because I fell asleep in the hallway next to the laundry basket. I guess at some point I pulled out one of her sweaters and curled up like a human embarrassment. The house was freezing, empty, and somehow still smelled like her. I told myself I'd take the high road, that I'd move on with dignity. I even wrote a list of things I'd do. Join a gym, change my haircut, maybe try kickboxing or pottery, something dumb and distracting. But by 8:45 a.m., I was already knee-deep in the one thing I knew I shouldn't do, digging through her digital footprints. Her laptop was locked, and I didn't have the password, but her tablet, she never logged out. And Cassie, for all her sharpness, never expected me to look. Honestly, she probably thought I wouldn't even notice she was gone. I opened her browser, and the first thing that hit me was a saved message thread labeled Work Retreat Group Chat. Inside were texts filled with dry office banter, project deadlines, event RSVPs, and buried in the middle a comment from someone named Nolan. "Looking forward to our next wine debrief, same place." My stomach dropped. I clicked on his profile photo. Some guy in sunglasses on a boat holding a cocktail with too much confidence. He had the kind of face people swipe right on. Athletic, annoying jawline, and probably the kind of laugh that echoes across rooftops during parties I'm never invited to. And of course, I'd never heard her mention him once. I scrolled further. Her replies were short, but not cold. "You picked the bottle this time," winking face. "Still laughing about that cab driver, LOL. There was no direct mention of what they did. Nothing incriminating, but sometimes the worst betrayals don't need explicit words. You can feel the shift in tone, the warmth reserved for someone who hasn't seen you cry over a broken washing machine at 2 a.m. I kept scrolling, heart pounding. That's when I found the photos. They weren't obvious, just two, actually. One was a selfie she took in the mirror of a bathroom I didn't recognize. Same dress she wore the night of just dinner. The second was him, Nolan, sitting on our couch. My couch, legs crossed, drink in hand, TV remote on his thigh. I zoomed in. The timestamp said 2 weeks ago, she brought him here into our home while I was at my sister's house fixing her dishwasher. I sat back, tablet shaking in my hands. This wasn't just betrayal, it was invasion. My space, my safety, my everything. Used like a hotel room in a city I no longer recognized. I didn't yell, didn't cry. Instead, I did the most humiliating thing I've ever done. I called her. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I stood up, went to the living room, and looked at the couch. The dent from where he sat was still visible. I threw the entire cushion into the trash. Then I grabbed the other one and did the same. I knew it was irrational, but I needed to erase him somehow. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped one on the driveway. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me wonder if she'd used that silence to giggle with him. I imagined their hands brushing over my books, their laughter bouncing off the same walls I used to whisper, "I love you," into. And for the first time, I felt like a guest in my own life. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because the next day I made a decision, one that would drag every hidden thing into the light. And if she wanted to play cold, I could go colder. I wish I could say I confronted him like a man. Like I tracked him down, looked him in the eyes, and demanded answers. But no, that would have required courage, something I didn't have that week. Instead, I learned who he really was through the most humiliating way possible, a voicemail not meant for me. It happened late the next evening. I'd been ignoring calls all day, mostly her parents, probably trying to stay neutral. The silence felt safer than explanations. I was halfway through a cold burrito and a miserable bottle of beer when I saw the missed call. Cassie's number. No message at first, but a minute later a second notification popped up. One new voicemail. I put the phone on speaker, arms crossed like I needed a shield. At first I heard nothing, just the faint rustling of movement, some background noise like a restaurant. Then the voice, a guy's voice, low, confident, too casual. "Tell him tonight. Seriously, he'll figure it out anyway. Might as well let him go with some dignity. And hey, if he gets dramatic, I'll swing by after. Just text me the emoji again. You know the one." That was it. Click. No name, no formalities, just instructions. Instructions about me. It took me a full minute to realize I'd been holding my breath. I replayed it again and again. I knew what emoji he meant. The stupid lock emoji she'd sent me once when we were dating as a joke, saying I had the key to her heart. She used that with him now. The realization came slow and cruel. This man, this Nolan, had plans involving my marriage in my house, on my time, and they laughed about it like it was an inside joke. I stared at my reflection in the TV screen, saw how hollow I looked. Then I opened my messages and typed one sentence to Cassie. "You left the lock open." I hit send, then turned off my phone. I didn't sleep. I walked the neighborhood for hours instead, like some ghost with a hoodie. Everything I passed, the diner where we had our second anniversary, the tiny bookstore she loved, even the traffic lights reminded me I'd built a life around someone who had mentally checked out months ago. By sunrise, I was done feeling sorry for myself. I logged into our shared cloud account. She didn't think I'd remember the login, but I did. Found our shared folder, ironically titled US. Inside were photos, receipts, even a video I forgot we'd made on our trip to Santa Fe. But what I wasn't expecting was a folder marked temp. I opened it, only 2 files. One was a photo of Nolan, the same boat picture I'd seen in the group chat, but zoomed in clearer. The second, a screenshot of an Airbnb confirmation. A cabin in the mountains reserved under her name. 2 guests, check-in date next week. So she wasn't just ending our marriage, she was already starting the next one. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I packed another bag. Not for her this time, but for me. I needed distance, perspective. Or maybe I just needed to scream into a canyon and hope it echoed back something other than shame. But right before I left the house, something stopped me. I remembered the voicemail, his voice, that smugness. And I knew then I couldn't just leave. This wasn't over yet. I didn't sleep that night either. I stayed up with the lights on, obsessing over that voicemail, over his face in my house, over the emoji Cassie once reserved just for me. Somewhere between rage and pathetic heartbreak, I made up my mind. I needed to remind him who I was. Not the guy with the crumbling marriage, not the ghost she left behind, just the husband, the one who had been erased without consent. So I found his number. It wasn't hard. I searched it from her cloud backups. He texted her once using a Starbucks receipt as a joke. The idiot didn't think I'd scroll through her screenshots folder. I saved his number, stared at it for half an hour, and typed out one sentence. "You'll never sit on that couch again." I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. He'd know. I hit send. 5 minutes later, he replied, "Tell her that she's the one who invited me over while you were too busy fixing sinks." I read that message 6 times. My hands shook, my throat tightened. It wasn't just a shot at me. It was a deliberate reminder that she had brought him into my space while I was busy doing normal, boring things. Things like trying to hold our stupid life together. He knew exactly what to say to slice me open, and it worked. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there with my phone face down, as if it were infected. I felt like throwing it, or maybe throwing myself out of the situation entirely. But then another message came in. Want to talk man to man? You clearly need it. That sentence did something to me. I wasn't sure if it was mockery or pity, and both made me feel worse. I wasn't ready for civility. I didn't want a bro chat. I wanted to scream at someone until my throat gave out. Instead, I opened my email and forwarded everything. Screenshots, voice memo, even the Airbnb reservation, to myself. I made a folder, labeled it reality. I needed to see it that way. Not a breakup, not a misunderstanding, just reality. But then came the twist. I got a message the next morning from someone else. Cassie's friend, Molly. We hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer. She messaged me on Facebook of all places. Hey Corey, I know it's not my business, but I just wanted you to know. Cassie's not who she's pretending to be. There's stuff you don't know. Check your email. Heart pounding, I opened the inbox. She'd sent me a file, photos, screenshots, chat logs, and the first one I opened nearly made me drop the laptop. Cassie at dinner, not with Nolan, with someone else entirely. A third man holding hands, leaning in. Same restaurant, same wine. This wasn't just one betrayal. This was a pattern, a whole web of lies, and Nolan wasn't the only one. Molly's final message read, "He's just the one you found, but she's been spiraling for a year. I thought you should know the full truth before you blame yourself." And that's when something clicked. All the nights she stayed late, all the times she said she was emotionally drained and needed space, all the cold shoulders, it wasn't about stress or routine, it was about detachment. A quiet, strategic exit. One she started long before I saw the signs, so I didn't text Nolan again. I didn't need to because suddenly he wasn't the problem. She was. And now it was time to talk to her. Not to beg, not to scream, but to end it the way she never gave me the courtesy to do, face to face, truth in hand. I asked her to meet at the cafe near the park, not because it was neutral ground or symbolic or anything poetic like that. Honestly, I picked it because it was public enough that neither of us could start yelling. And they made the only muffin she used to pretend not to laugh at. I sat at the table with a folder in front of me, printed screenshots, receipts, and the voicemail transcribed on paper. It felt theatrical, but I needed something to hold in my hands when everything else was slipping through my fingers. Cassie walked in 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She sat down across from me like it was a business meeting, not a marriage unraveling. No apology, no small talk, just crossed legs and that fake calm exhale she always did when she was pretending to be the rational one. "So," she said, brushing invisible dust from her knee. "You wanted to talk?" I slid the folder across the table. She didn't even touch it. "I know about Nolan," I said quietly, "and Jason and the Airbnb." Her jaw twitched for half a second. Not surprise, irritation, like I'd ruined her weekend plans. "Look, Corey," she said, "I knew this was coming eventually. You've been looking for an excuse to play the victim for years." That hit harder than I thought it would. I leaned back, heart pounding, fingers pressed against the side of my coffee cup just to feel something grounded. "Play the victim," I repeated. "You lied, Cassie. You brought strangers into our home. You made me believe I was going crazy for asking questions. And I didn't even yell. I folded your bags. I packed your snacks." She finally looked at the folder. Her hand hovered over it, then pulled back. "It wasn't about them," she said. "It was about feeling alive again. You don't make me feel anything anymore." That sentence punched the air out of my lungs. I stared at her, blinking, hoping she'd soften it or take it back. But she didn't. She sipped her drink like we were chatting about the weather. "You used to laugh," she added. "Now you just mope and fix things and sigh a lot." "I was holding everything together," I muttered. "You were exhausting," she said flatly. That was it, the nail in the coffin. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She had rewritten the story so well in her head that I was the inconvenience. I was the emotional burden she wanted to unsubscribe from. I stood up slowly. She watched me like I was being dramatic again, like I tripped over my own feelings on the way out. But before I left, I said one last thing. You didn't just kill the marriage, Cassie. You buried it, danced on the grave, and invited strangers to the funeral. She didn't flinch. She actually smirked. And that smile, not the one I fell in love with, but the one she reserved for manipulation, followed me out the door like a shadow. I got into my car, sat there for 20 minutes, and didn't start the engine. Not because I didn't know what to do next, but because I finally realized she never loved me the way I loved her. Not really. She loved the idea of me, the safety net, the audience. But I was done being the background character in her performance. I drove home, not to sulk, but to begin again without her. 3 days passed without a word from Cassie. No texts, no emails, no sudden calls in the middle of the night begging to explain. I thought I'd be relieved, but it only made everything more surreal. Like she vanished into a different reality where our marriage never happened. Meanwhile, I was still in our house, staring at the dent in the carpet where her suitcase sat. Every room smelled like absence. I spent the days in a fog, alternating between deleting photos of us and obsessively checking my phone in case she reached out. It was pathetic. I knew it. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself I was ready to move on, there was always this microscopic hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd come back with a tear-streaked face and a genuine apology. Instead, on the third evening, someone knocked on the door. I assumed it was a delivery or a neighbor. I hadn't ordered anything, but I hadn't exactly been thinking clearly either. I opened the door half distracted and froze. It wasn't Cassie, it was Nolan. He was taller than I expected, smug like always, but in person it was worse. He didn't flinch. He just raised a brow and offered me a lazy smile, like we were old college buddies bumping into each other at a gas station. "You look rough," he said. "Mind if I come in?" I blinked. "Why would you even think that's an option?" He shrugged and leaned against the doorframe. "Because I figured we should talk like adults. Cassie's done pretending, and I thought it'd help you if you heard some of it from me. The unfiltered version." The unfiltered. I started to laugh. It wasn't joyful. It sounded like something tearing apart in my throat. "You slept with my wife in my house, and now you want to have coffee and a closure talk like we're on a therapy podcast." He didn't move. "She said you'd be dramatic." That did it. I stepped out, closing the door behind me. I didn't want him seeing the inside of my home again, not even a sliver. "Say what you came to say," I muttered. He exhaled like I was inconveniencing him. "She never hated you. You know, she just felt like you gave up on yourself a long time ago." "She said that?" "No, but I know what she said after every dinner with you." He replied, "How you'd sigh more than you spoke. How you always looked tired. How she wanted someone who made her feel light again." I clenched my fist so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. He looked me up and down. "You want to be mad at someone? Be mad at the version of yourself you let rot." And with that, he turned and walked away like he just delivered a speech that set me free. But he was wrong. Because as much as I hated him, as much as I wanted to believe he was a symptom of Cassie's betrayal, something inside me whispered that part of what he said wasn't a lie. And that hurt more than anything. The morning after Nolan showed up, I stood in the living room for a long time, just looking at the quiet mess she left behind. A pair of earrings still on the side table, one of her jackets hanging on the back of the kitchen chair, a half-used bottle of shampoo in the shower that still smelled like lavender and lies. For a while I debated burning it all, but I didn't. Not out of nostalgia, out of peace, because I realized something. As I packed her final box, I was done letting bitterness narrate my story. I boxed up the rest of her things, even the little trinkets I once thought were sacred. There was something almost meditative about it. Like each item I placed inside the cardboard was a piece of weight being lifted off my chest. When I sealed the last box with tape, I wrote 2 words on top in black marker: "Never again." I texted her to pick it up. No emotion, no bait, just the address and the time. She never replied. But that night when I got back from walking Elmo around the block, the box was gone. That was it. That was our final exchange. And for the first time in weeks, the silence in the house didn't feel like punishment. It felt like clarity. Over the next few days, I started doing something weird, smiling. Not because I forgot everything that happened, but because I could finally breathe without second-guessing every inhale. I went to the barber shop and cut off the hair she once begged me to keep long. I joined a writing class. I even signed up for a pottery course. Yeah, I know, cliché, but when your life gets shattered, sometimes shaping clay into something new makes you believe you can do the same with yourself. Last week, I passed by the restaurant. The restaurant? The one where she had her just dinner. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. I just kept walking straight past it, straight toward a life I now knew had nothing to do with her. And you know what? I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful because sometimes it takes losing someone to realize how much of yourself you had abandoned just to keep them. So to anyone watching this right now, if someone makes you feel small, forgotten, or like a backup plan in your own life, pack the box, close the door, and start walking forward. Not for revenge, not for answers, just for yourself. Which part of this story hit you the hardest or reminded you of something from your own life? Share it in the comments. You never know who else needs to hear it. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. Thanks for following this journey, and remember, every ending is just a new beginning waiting to be written.